In today's episode, there will be discussion of torture and human remains. So, if you aren't in the headspace for these topics, please be kind to your mind, and I will see you in the next one. Today, we will be looking at a chilling Irish murder mystery that has remained a cold case since the 80s, and that is the murder of Antoinette Smith. Antoinette was a young 27-year-old mother of two little girls, and she went missing after seeing a David Bowie concert and having a much needed night out with her friends. She was found dead months later on a mountainside, not too far from where she had this night out. And this case has been shrouded in mystery ever since, and her family is desperate for answers. I had reservations covering this case due to it being an international case. However, I really feel that her story should be told. Let's begin by looking at the case timeline and also what was initially known about Antoinette Smith and her untimely end. Antoinette Smith was born in 1960 and was originally from Crumlin, which is a suburb in Dublin, Ireland. And going forward, just so you know, there are going to be some Irish words and names that I am likely going to butcher, even though I myself am Irish. I live in America. However, my ancestry, it's like 98% Irish. And also, I've been to Ireland. It's a beautiful country. That being said, I'm not from there. It's not technically my culture, but I want to do my best to get names right, get things as correct as I can. So if I mispronounce something or if something is off that I'm reporting, definitely let me know in the comment section because I certainly don't want to provide any misinformation. And to be honest, while researching this case, I did find some difficulty in finding a lot of details about Antoinette. There really isn't a lot of information about her early life, but I did find out that she grew up with four older brothers and she was doted on as the baby of the family and the only girl. She was a happy child and had a fairly normal upbringing. In her teenage years, her love for fashion, music, and just time with friends really took center stage in her life. She was described as a social butterfly and being very bubbly and sweet. At age 19, Antoinette married Carl Smith in 1979, and they moved to a suburb in South Dublin called Clondalkin, which is considered to be both a fairly safe and affordable area. They later had two daughters named Rachel and Lisa. And since Carl and Antoinette married so young, they did find it difficult to maintain a happy marriage, and they did end up divorcing. According to the research that I found, they separated after 8 years of marriage in 1987. Antoinette and her daughters remained in their family home while Carl left and found a new place to live. Despite the separation, the two remained civil and they did their best to co parent their young daughters. Carl was known to care for his daughters so that Antoinette could have a break and go out with friends. And all in all, it just seems that Antoinette and Carl seem to be making the best out of a difficult situation. The case begins on the 11th of July in 1987 when Antoinette and a friend attended a David Bowie concert at Slane Castle Co. And this is just 30 miles north of Dublin City. The girls were staying with their dad, and Antoinette and a friend took the 56 bus to O'Connell Street in Dublin City, where they bought tickets for the concert and two David Bowie t-shirts. And I have to say, I've always been a huge David Bowie fan, and so I can't imagine how cool it would have been to see David Bowie in concert, during his like peak. I think that would have been so amazing. Antoinette and her friend then took a bus to Slane Castle at around 3 p.m., and by around 11 p.m., both women had returned to Dublin City from the concert, and they headed to a nightclub known as La Mirage on Parnell Street. They met up with two male friends, and the group was at this club until about 2 a.m. Antoinette's friend was ready to go home at this point, but Antoinette, being a young single mother raising two girls who rarely got time for herself, really wanted to enjoy the night, stay out a bit longer. And this other friend was pretty adamant about going home. And so she left the club, but she did give Antoinette a spare key to her house. The two male friends were also ready to head home, so they walked with Antoinette to a taxi rank on O'Connell Street, where they took a taxi home to Ballymun. And the last time that these two friends saw Antoinette, she was walking towards the O'Connell Bridge at 2:30 a.m. This was the last time any of her friends saw her alive. 3 days later, on July 14th, Antoinette was reported missing by her ex-husband, Carl, because she had never returned from her night out, and he immediately grew concerned because this was not like her. When it was time for her to collect her children, she always did so, and she wasn't the type of person who was MIA. Even though her and Carl were divorced, when it came to co-parenting, that communication was apparently there, and so because she went MIA and he didn't know what was going on, he went to the police and reported her missing. However, they told him to go home and return to the next day with a photograph of Antoinette, and so he did just that. So Carl returns to the station the next day with a photo of Antoinette, and he also brought one of Antoinette's friends who was with her that night. This friend gave a detailed account of the events of the previous Saturday night and Sunday morning, and the police then began their investigation into Antoinette's sudden disappearance. In the early months of the investigation, there really wasn't much to go off of. There wasn't any sign of Antoinette anywhere, and there wasn't a lot of physical evidence to pull from. This is also the age before cell phones, and so it's not like they were able to pull cell phone data, location data, anything like that. Everything was kind of at a standstill for a while until about 10 months later, when on April 3rd, 1988, a family happened to be out walking in a remote part of the Dublin Wicklow Mountains, and they made a gruesome discovery. In some kind of makeshift grave was a body, which was later identified as the remains of the missing mother, Antoinette Smith. She was found wearing that same David Bowie t-shirt that she had bought that night, and there was a key on her person, which was the same house key that her friend had given her. And I'm going to put an additional trigger warning here because this is really upsetting, the state of her body. There were two plastic bags found around her head, and there wasn't any additional head trauma, which indicated that she likely died of asphyxiation, somebody putting a bag over her head and basically wrapping it around and holding it until she finally died. As somebody who is incredibly claustrophobic, and I very often have breathing problems due to my anxiety disorder. I don't have asthma or anything like that, but I do get these bouts of breathing problems where I feel like I can't really take a full breath, and it's really scary. It's not fun. And I just cannot imagine dying in this way by someone forcing a bag over my head. And it's one of the scariest things to me. It's honestly one of my nightmares. And I can't imagine the fear that she must have felt. And it honestly makes me sick to my stomach just thinking about it. And this just is so sad that someone would do something to this young woman who was only in her 20s and a mother of two. And it just makes me so sad to think that the way that she died in such a horrible, horrible way, she did not deserve to die this way. Following the finding of her remains, the authorities attempted to spread awareness as much as possible for Antoinette's horrific murder. Authorities attempted to walk through her movements around the 11th and the 12th of July to hopefully find any potential witnesses. It was aired on national television all across Ireland, and soon after, two witnesses did come forward. The first witness was a taxi driver who claimed to have picked up two men and someone who looked a lot like Antoinette on O'Connell Street at around 3:30 a.m., the same night that she went missing. The two men were not the same male friends who were with her at the club. Both men were described as being in their early 20s, and one was very tall to the point where his knees dug into the back of the driver's seat. The other man was described as being shorter with dark hair parted down the middle, and he was described as having a rough Dublin accent, and he was slightly threatening towards the taxi driver on the journey. Apparently, this man actually made a joke that he was going to hijack the taxi. The driver also overheard them discussing going to another party in the area. And where this taxi was headed was around the same area where Antoinette's body would be found about 10 months later. The second witness was a dog walker who had been walking in the area known as Crow Wood, and I probably am mispronouncing that, but this wooded area is located in the Dublin Wicklow Mountains, roughly 2 miles from where Antoinette's body was found. This dog walker was walking on the morning of July 12th at around 6 a.m. According to the witness, he and the three dogs he was walking were hiking up a hill, and a lone man suddenly appeared in their path. The man stopped in his tracks for a moment, but then continued walking past the dog walker. And as they passed, the dog walker said, "Hello." But this other man didn't say anything and walked quickly past. And it appeared that he was attempting to conceal his face. So, definitely a very suspicious and kind of bizarre interaction. The witness noticed that the stranger was walking towards the parking lot at the entrance of the woods, and he became worried because his van was the only one in the lot. So the dog walker quickly headed to this parking lot with his dogs, and while hurrying back, he noticed that the strange man was now talking with another man. When the men noticed the dog walker, they began to walk away at a fast pace. And the witness reached the car park. And by the time he got there, he could no longer see either of the men. So he just went ahead and drove home. The witness didn't give much of a description for the second man, but the first man that he ran into on the trail, he was described as being around 26 years of age with a thin face, parted hair, and he was wearing dark clothes that didn't really look like hiking clothes. And the witness described the man as kind of looking out of place for this wooded area. He didn't look like he was going on a normal walk or a hike. The account from this witness was put out to the public nationwide, but sadly, Antoinette's murder remains unsolved and no suspects have been identified to this day. Let's now look into the theories about who may have been responsible for the murder of Antoinette. 37 years have now elapsed since Antoinette's body was initially discovered in April 1988, and there have been no new leads, and it is still unknown what exactly happened after Antoinette left the club that night. Based on the witness reports by both the taxi driver and the dog walker, it's possible that maybe the same men who she was in the taxi with were the same men who the dog walker witnessed in the woods. Basically, the only thing we have to go on is both of these witness reports and how there are some similarities. The fact that nobody has come forward yet makes it really difficult to identify these men. It's possible that these men aren't even alive today. Sadly, while there has been a renewed appeal for the murder of Antoinette Smith, it's very likely that we may not have a resolution for this case unless someone comes forward with information. Somebody out there does know something, and the longer they wait to come forward, the harder solving this case becomes. Lisa and Rachel, Antoinette's daughters, are still desperate for answers and for justice for their mother. I truly hope that some kind of resolution comes with this case because nothing like this should have happened to this young woman. She did not deserve any of this. And it's just so sad that these two girls had to grow up without their mother, a mother who truly loved them and was taken way too soon. If anyone has any information on Antoinette Smith's murder, you can contact the Garda Confidential Line at 1-800-666-111. And I'll put this information as well as my case sources for researching in the description box of the episode. But with all that being said, thank you for listening. Be safe, and I will see you in the next one.